Thank you, Francesca. Good morning, everybody. Again, my name is Peter-Bratt, and the film that Francesca was referring to is called La Mission. We did premiere it at the 2009 Film Festival at the Sundance, and we had a national theatrical release last spring. The film is currently available on DVD and is rotating on Showtime. But before I show you a clip of that film, and then I'm going to show you a clip from my first film, Follow Me Home, I want to introduce myself properly. My mother is an indigenous woman who comes from a small Indian town in the Andes in Peru. And my father's from here. He's Anglo. My mother came here when she was 14 years old, and met my father. She had 5 children. They split up when I was 4 years old, and so I was raised by a single mother. And my mom was actually thinking about going back home with her 5 kids. She had no family support system here. And she saw a young man named Richard Oakes on KQED in 1969, and he was calling Indians of all tribes to join the occupation on Alcatraz. I was a child of the 60s and of the 70s, and during that time, in San Francisco, and particularly in the Mission District, you saw many different social movements. The Black Panther Party coming up across the bay in Oakland, the Brown Berets, the Red Power movement, American Indian movement. You had farm workers marching to assert rights, or workers' rights in the fields. And a lot of that was centered in San Francisco, and in the Mission in particular. And that's what we kind of grew up with. And it was the first time in literally centuries that these communities were asserting who they were, not just politically, but culturally. So that definitely informs a lot of the work that my brother and I do, and the work that we also do within the community. So with that, I'm going to show you a couple clips, and then from there I'll continue the conversation. So.
What are you going to tell them? Isn't this little exhibition nothing but a farce, anyway? So tell them anything.
The President of the United States.
Deceit is sometimes a necessary course of action. Actually, deceit is too strong of a word. A prudent man might call it a slight breach of faith. No more. Should a captain go down with a ship of fools? Only if he is as foolish. Why should you honor your word when to do so would go against your own interest? You must ask yourself, would your friends, if presented with the same opportunities, act any differently? Nay, not. They are only men, dominated and ruled by their immediate needs and appetites. They, like all men, will keep no faith with you, and therefore you are under no obligation to keep it with them. Now you must look to the end, my dear boy, not the means by which you achieve it.
from my first film, which was called Follow Me Home, and it was the story's about it's a fool's quest about these 5 inner city artists who set off across the country to go paint a mural on the White House. And then there's this kind of subconscious phantom that haunts the main character, and that's one of those scenes. And I wanted to show this clip because I just got back from Washington, D.C., being at the White House, and La Mission was one of 10 independent films that was chosen to be a part of an initiative that was the partnership of the President's Commission on the Arts and Humanities and the Sundance Institute. They put 10 independent films, 5 from the United States and 5 from around the world. And those 10 films move as a curated piece and travel around the world. They go to China, Uganda, Kenya, Puerto Rico. And they also went to some, they're going to some, an African-American community. It's one of the poorest African-American communities in the United States outside of Mississippi. And then they also went to some different reservations. I just came back from the Saginaw Chippewa Reservation in northern Michigan, where we showed the 10 films. 2 filmmakers traveled to each location. And I had a really, really powerful experience there. We worked with a bunch of different Native youth. But before we began that, one of their tribal elders came, and he started the whole event off with a prayer. And he fanned down he smudged down the filmmakers, and then he really wanted us to come and see the tribe's main exhibit, which they just finished a few years ago. And we went through this exhibit, and it has 15 modules, and when you start, you get introduced to how the Chippewa Anishinaabe people lived before Europeans came. And you see this really rich, beautiful history that is expressed through their art and their relationship to the land, the animals there. And then as you go through the module, you see what started happening to the people once there was European contact. And as you get through towards the middle of the exhibit, I was literally in tears. And one of the things that you saw was after the federal government had tried to actually terminate the people to acquire land, they switched policies, and they had a policy which was kill the Indian, save the man. And starting in the late 1800s and all the way up into the 30s, they physically removed Indian children from the home. Parents were not allowed to see their babies. And the children were beaten if they were caught speaking their language. They weren't allowed to practice their spirituality. It was considered, devil worship. They were indoctrinated into Christianity. Essentially, the entire culture. They tried to annihilate the entire culture and assimilate the people into Western modalities of being. And the reason I bring that up is because I also just recently visited Arizona, and in Arizona they legislated the repeal of introducing Chicano studies in the public schools. They won't allow any taxpayer money to fund anything outside of Western history, and now they're trying to take that to the halls of higher education. And 13 states have filed similar acts on the books to enact the same kinds of policies. And so the reason why I bring that up is because you're here to talk about, as educators, our children are in your hands. Educators in Native culture and other cultures, all cultures, I think, are held in high esteem. And for me, how I got involved in film was I was raised around a very strong, culturally strong woman. After centuries, Native people, just like up in the Chippewa country, were taught to be ashamed of who they were. It wasn't until 40 years after contact that the people in the Western Hemisphere were declared human beings. And so Native people have been struggling, literally giving their lives to maintain culture. And culture is really how we form our identity. And so it was that idea, that struggle, that inspired me and my brother to go into filmmaking. And a lot of the culture, it's woven into the stories. And so what we try to do is we try to take some of the old stories that we grew up with, the cultural stories that we see within the community, and then weave them into a modern weave. And so, for instance, in La Misión, it's about a contemporary Chicano man, you know, who finds beauty in building lowrider cars. And he finds out that his only son, who's 18, is in school, is gay. And that completely destroys his perception of who he is as a strong Chicano male. And so he begins this inward journey of confronting who he is, how he defines power, how he sees himself as a male. And subsequently, even though a lot of young people have come in, young people, they see the lowrider cars, they hear the music, they see Benjamin Bratt in a tank top, and they say, "Ooh, I got to check this out." and a lot of them are prepared to go on this journey and really take part in the conversation about issues that really go a lot deeper than that. And so what we're really proud to see happen is La Misión has been used in almost every state university in California in the Chicano Studies department to dialogue and have conversations about some of the issues that we face within our community, as well as reflect back the beautiful aspects of culture that really work as a foundation to strengthen the people. So that's where we kind of come from. By no means do I consider myself an educator. I have 3 sisters who are educators, and they're constantly looking for ways to bring in people from the community. You know, this morning I got here early, and I walked at and looked at some of the lists you have on your sheets, and I see that my sisters, they engage in the very same thing. You know, depending on the makeup of their student body, they try to find those areas that students can access. And so, for instance, even my sister Nadia, she put together a curriculum around La Misión, and she shared it with other educators around the country. And they use it. They use critical analysis, and children learn how to write papers. They learn how to think critically and analytically, but they do it from a place that is comfortable for them. One of the things that we just did up in Chippewa country, and I found this to be the case in whether you're talking about inner city African American communities, Latino communities. Is that we went up there and we had one day to work with these Native youth to develop a story. You know, we're going to do it like a three minute short. Develop a story and put it together, and then present it to the rest of the youth groups. And so we broke off into little groups, and really used the avenue of using film to tell a story that they wanted to tell, that reflected who they were, how they saw the world, and taught them how to work together respectfully, agreeing to disagree, all those different things. But one of the things that I find when working with youth is that almost the biggest obstacle is trying to instill a sense of confidence. I would say almost universally when we go and work with youth, there's just such a lack of confidence that it's sometimes even hard to get young people to participate. And I think I can speak that to directly because I'm one of those kids. I was like that. I used to be ashamed of the color of my skin, of the different things that our community has, because oftentimes when I went to school, you don't see who you are, you're the contributions of your people. You don't see the beauty of your culture reflected in any of the institutions that you grew up around. It's not reflected in the dominant culture. Even when we take the film like La Misión to show it to communities, we're so used to seeing other people, other cultures on the big screen that when all of a sudden you see something that kind of celebrates an aspect of Chicano or Latino or Native culture, there's just this hunger. And people come, and it really seems to wake something up. And so one of the things that we find is that is to encourage the young people that they have a voice, and that voice matters. And what happened with the Chippewa people, what happened with a lot of the natives in Latin America, what the young Chicano students in Arizona are experiencing right now is that for so long we've heard that who we are, how we see the world, the cultures that we see beauty in don't matter. And you internalize that. And so oftentimes that comes out as what I have to say or what I have to contribute also doesn't matter. And so what we try to do is to instill that confidence in two ways. One, by acknowledging the beauty and the importance of culture. You know, I have a little nephew who was in school, and they were in a music program. He's 11 years old, and they got together. He was like they were in a choir, and they were learning all the American standards. And you know, he was very bashful. They got up there and they had little gowns, and they got up and sung. And but what people don't know, and his teacher didn't know, is that culturally at home and within the community, my little nephew, he's a phenomenal singer. He sings native songs. You know, he uses a drum. He's got this incredible voice. He's called upon as a helper. And he sings, you know, when somebody passes away, you know, we have ways to take care of the body and help the family deal with the grief. And he knows those songs. He knows how to greet the sun in the morning, a new day. You know, he knows those songs. When a child is born, you know, he knows how to greet that spirit and welcome it. He knows those songs. And when he was up there, you know, during the intermission, I went up to him and I said to him, I said, nephew, I said, why don't you sing a sunrise song? And he just bursted up into laughter. And he just cracked up and he just said, in his, you know, he laughed because in no way in his mind was there room for that expression in his school. So that part of him, which is a huge part of who he is, and why he's loved and why he's valued within the family, within the community, he kind of tucks it away and keeps it in secret, and nobody knows about that. And so what we see when we go is, you know, he's up there and he's learning how to sing, and he's singing American standards. And in the same way, when he was a little younger, we had a relative who passed away, and he saw his uncles come together and how you have to take care of the body in a certain way. And then a few months later, you know, my little niece was born, and he saw how, you know, they had songs and how they had ceremonies to welcome this little spirit. And he was 7 years old at this time, and he looked at me and he said, Uncle, he says, how come we don't learn how to do this in school? And so what he sees is, you know, in school you learn how to go out and be productive. You know, you learn how to read, you learn how to write. But within the culture, within the community, you also learn about how to live. You know, as a human being, we deal with grief, we deal with death, we deal with birth, new day, the elements, food. You know, all these things have really rich stories. And so he learns that within the community, and he learns that within the culture. But in his mind, there's a clear distinction that in school, in education, it's a separate thing. Like the two, they don't come together. And so as his uncle and, you know, his mom is also an educator, we try to bridge that gap because they really do go together. You know, education and also principles for living, for life, how to be a good human being. You know, why are we here? You know, why do we teach? Why is it important? You know, to instill this in our young people. Those are deeper questions that go deeper than learning, you know, algebra, fractions. I mean, those are necessary tools. What I try to instill with young people is that, you know, I failed 2 grades. I almost dropped out of college. When I got to college, I didn't know how to write a paper. The first paper I wrote, I interpreted a Shakespeare sonnet, you know, and I thought I did a bang-up job, and I got my first paper. The professor said, you know, please come see me after class, and I thought, man, I must have knocked it out of the park. And I went in to talk to him, and I went to UC Santa Cruz, and the professor said to me, he said, young man, you do not deserve to be in this institution. Oh. And I nearly dropped out. There was an African-American woman who she said to me, she said, baby, you can't do that, we need you. And so she hooked me up with some writing tutoring courses, and I finally learned how to think critically and use the language and write. And what I try to instill with my young nephews and nieces and other young people is that these are just tools. They're really just tools for you to build and for you to express what it is that you have inside. And everybody has a gift. You know, in our native ways, everyone comes here with a mission. Everyone has medicine, and you're supposed to find, your mission is to find that medicine and then share it with the tribe, you know, and help all life. So what we try to do is, you know, filmmaking. I studied political science. I didn't know a thing about filmmaking. I didn't know a thing about screenwriting. I just knew that there were stories out there and within my community and with my family, and I didn't see them reflected on the big screen. I didn't see them reflected on the TV screen or in the dominant culture. Nobody was doing it, so I said, you know, I'm going to try. And so I used the tools that I had acquired to educate myself about how to write a screenplay, how to make a film, and a lot of failure too. I've only made 2 films. I consider myself a student of filmmaking. I still feel like I'm learning the craft of storytelling, but I see them just as tools. And I think, at least with my nieces and nephews, when I tell them, you know, like, why do I have to learn this? Why do I have to learn? I try to explain that it's a tool. You know, I also have I pay my bills doing construction, so, you know, oftentimes I show my nephew, I show him how to use a tape measure, how to use a skill saw. I said, if you have all these tools but you don't know how to use them, how are you going to build? And they just really seem to make that connection. And I think that a lot of times young people, they have a hard time seeing that what they're learning, why they're in school, is to acquire tools. How to use those tools then to then build and find and express that medicine that you have inside. So that's where we come from as filmmakers. That's what inspires us to tell these stories, and to see educators like yourselves using the films and the stories to foster dialogue, to have conversation. Even this program I just mentioned to you that was in DC, that premiered at DC. The intention of it is to have cultural dialogue, to foster understanding, to foster tolerance, because at the end of the day, the world is becoming increasingly more dangerous and violent. And you know, I'm a father of 2, and you know, as an educator, you work with young people, and I'm sure you see some of the things that go on in homes that children bring to the classroom. Our children, they're facing some very difficult challenges today. And me as a father, I worry about the world that my little son and my little daughter are going to inherit. And so that's what motivates me to do that. And so teachers, in my mind, they're way up here. You know, they're way up here because this was the first year my little son, he went to his little kindergarten, and when I went there and we dropped him off, you know, I shed tears. My little baby, you know, I'm turning his life over to this teacher that I don't really know. You know, I don't know, but I entrusted him, and so teachers, they're entrusted with that. In my mind, it's a sacred trust. You know, what you put into their mind, you know, how you approach them, do you respect them, and then also, you know, coming from a culture, you know, his teacher's Anglo. Are they going to respect who he is, where he comes from? You know, I also live in San Francisco, so you can assume that that's usually the case. There's that respect. But you know, in other parts of the country, like in Arizona, that doesn't happen. And on reservations, that doesn't happen. So I see what you do is it's really, really important work. And I think I'm about to run out of time, but with that, I would love to open it up to you these last few minutes if you have any questions.
I come from Michigan, embarrassingly, I'm stating that, and I wanted to know, those reservations are very closed. How did you get your work in there and be able to work with those, you know, tribes?
The tribe was, I didn't find the tribe. I went there as part of the Film Forward initiative, which again is it's a partnership, an initiative that's in partnership with the President's Council on Arts and Humanities and the Sundance Institute. And you know, Robert Redford, he's been fostering a relationship with Native communities for over 30 years. That was actually the main inspiration behind the Sundance Institute, was to help Native filmmakers tell their stories. So that groundwork had been done. But you know, again, I consider, you know, I'm a Latino, but I'm also indigenous. I'm also Native. So my mom has been involved with Native struggles for over 35 years, and so there's that trust. And I think what makes it effective for me to go into tribes like that is, oftentimes, you know, you go and you work with these kids, and sometimes there's an issue of trust. But you know, if they see me like a brown face, there's almost like this, wow, you can do that? You know, it's almost like you give permission for them. Just they see themselves reflected in you. And certainly with the film in La Mission, a lot of the struggles that the characters are challenged with, many of the people on the reservation face similar challenges.
So they were receptive.
Oh, very much so.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it was beautiful. In fact, the name of their exhibit that they put together, I think I'm going to pronounce this wrong, but it's Niba Nijuyung, and that means telling our story. And so, Niba Nijuyung, and it means telling. That's the name of the exhibit, is telling our story, and it was put together by a lot of the elders and the tribal leaders, and that's how much importance they put on it. Telling the story is so critical to the survival of the people. Without the story, there's no cohesion. It's what keeps the culture together.
Hi. Beautiful movies. How old are you, if I may ask?
Yo, that's my business.
Is that legal? Because I'm 56, and you know I've been living around here all these years too. So I'm just kind of trying to get the sense of the context of. So just wondering how old you are.
Right, I'm 48. Pushing the 5-0. Trying to keep it tight.
Something else that I am hoping that you will excuse me. I'm not the most tactful person, but I'm hoping that I do not hear you suggest that Eurocentric arts and literature do not involve the great sacraments of life.
No, not at all. No.
We have come very dangerously close to saying that many times.
No, and that's actually the argument in Arizona, for instance. The legislators are saying that by introducing cultural studies outside of the Western canon, we're undermining the Western canon, and that certainly is not what I'm conveying. We are all
arguing, by the way, for Arizona. Do not get me wrong. I don't want to be painted with that brush.
No, I agree. I'm actually. I did want to share one thing. You know, I'm working on the story of Rachel Carson, who wrote a book called Silent Spring, and she's considered the mother of the modern day environmental movement. She was 56 years old at the time the book came out. She died a year and a half later of cancer, and one of the things that she addressed was the use of pesticides and agribusiness and how it was polluting the groundwater, the soil, the air, and how it changes us on a cellular level. And one of the things that she came across, which I thought is just such a great metaphor, is that today with agribusiness, agribusiness invented monocropping, where you for hundreds of thousands of acres you grow only one thing, corn, for instance. And she was saying it was that monocropping culture that led to this increase in the population of pests. She said in natural cultivation, there are many different things growing. The corn doesn't just grow by itself. And when many things grow, the pests are kept in balance. It's only when you remove all the diversity from the natural environment that one thing, it has no natural enemies.
I agree with you.
And so it thrives and it attacks, and so they have to invent these these increasingly poisonous chemicals to kill those things. And so I thought it was just such a brilliant and beautiful metaphor about us, about all life, that we really thrive when there are a multitude of varieties growing in the field.
Thank you. Sadly, this conference has not had the Anglo voice at all, so forgive me if I would like to include that also in the biodiversity. And I'm sorry, that's not on you, obviously. And your movies were lovely.
I want to thank you so much for raising these important questions for us as educators about really what is the purpose of education. And I think that we all have so much to learn from our natural environment and from indigenous people. black and brown children who are not achieving according to standardized measures. And I think it's up to us to really rethink the frame. I believe that the achievement gap is it's manufactured. I'm not being articulate. That our current assessment system has created a paradigm about winners and losers in education that is really false, and that it's in all of our self-interest that all of our children, as you are saying, understand, explore, what is my purpose, why am I here, and how can I make my full contribution? And so any misunderstanding that this work is for Latino kids, or African American kids, is false. It's about the interdependence, and it's about every child's voice. And so I just want to thank you, and I think that that really challenges us as we move forward about how we get out of this us and them, winners and losers, and really understand our role as educators to help every child make their full contribution, every child succeed. And we're just in an important moment where there are so many pieces coming into place where just the kind of work, for example, that we're doing.
I also want to comment in that it's really important. Right now, I'm using the English language to communicate with you.
Thank you.
I drove up here in a car that utilizes the internal combustion engine, a product of Western science. I live within a capitalist democracy. The film that I address, addresses homophobia, and recently we live by the rule of law, and we study that with the founding fathers who studied the modern thinkers from Europe,
and the native people of the Iroquois. Yeah,
and the Iroquois Confederacy. But what I wanted to point out is that we live within a Western frame. Our kids get 2 weeks off during the Christmas vacation. We get another week off during Easter. And so we're inculcated on a daily basis and utilizing and I would say respecting and paying homage to the pillars of Western civilization. And so I think as native children or African children or Latino children, for instance, me, growing up and reading about Thanksgiving, which we get another holiday for, it's a mention in the line of history, which is the history of colonization and also progress, moving towards civilization. And oftentimes, our young people are footnotes in that narrative. And so that narrative, I think, is really well placed. And we may be unconscious of it, and I think that also speaks to, I'm getting into some territory here, but white privilege. And that sometimes that's invisible, and it's hard to identify and see it. And so we sometimes think that the European element is missing, but it's really invisible. And I want to give you an example. When we were marketing La Mission and trying to get funding from the traditional Hollywood studios, we actually met with a white gay executive from one of the studios who read the script and said, I love the story. I love what it says, but it's passé. It's already been done. Haven't you seen Brokeback Mountain? Will and Grace is on TV. And the assumption was coming from a privileged perspective, and that is that because the dominant culture, or because it had been dealt with with white protagonists in Brokeback Mountain, it therefore had been dealt with by all people. And it points to that experience is the universal experience. And so, respectfully, had to point out that that's not the case in our community. This is still a huge issue that is taboo for various reasons that needs to be addressed. And I think sometimes we run into those things, but I agree with you. I'm not an advocate for just looking at one thing and saying this is good and this is bad. I really, like you're saying, it's all integrated, because it's like the lowriders themselves. Even going out to Chicano country, and Che has a romantic interlude with an African American woman, and sometimes within the Latino community, it's like, why is he with a black woman? What's up? And most people don't realize that the lowrider culture, they drive the cars to black R&B soul music. and they've integrated and made that their own music. And I would say that there's conscious and unconscious cross-cultural pollination that's been going on for 500 years. And we're, you know, I'm African, I'm European, I'm all those things. And I think what's great about this country is that you can take the best of these things and forge new identities and forge new stories to go forward, because like I said, the world is becoming increasingly dangerous.
That's a good point to make. It was unsaid very many times, and I appreciate your remarks, but that's why I asked you how old you are. I am an educator and I live this every day, and I hear a lot about this all the time. So it's not something that's not present in the education.
I want to thank Peter for his time with us.